when the battle is about to begin, Arjun, who is leading the Pandavas, he develops cold feet. And we have all experienced that sometimes that we may prepare for an event with great enthusiasm, but when we are very close to the event, we suddenly develop a heavy heart and feel that why did we get into it at all? So Sri Krishna actually administers him a mild but a very firm rebuke. Tells him what has happened to you. Your behavior does not befit an Aryan. Now that raises the question, who is an Aryan? And that is something I can tell a little properly because Sri Aurobindo has talked about it in some detail. That since the essence is imperishable, nobody is really slain, nobody is really killed. And if nobody is killed, there's no slayer, there's nobody who kills. These terms are used because of not perceiving the truth. Truth with a capital T. With a small t, yes, to a limited extent, it is true, but it is not the highest truth, the deepest truth, the widest truth.
Namaste, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you. It brings me great joy to welcome you all to the second month of talks on the Gita. Turning to the Gita is a privilege, an expression of the divine grace that makes us reach out to the Gita for our psycho-spiritual transformation. We are honored to have Dr. Ramesh Bijlani with us, a speaker, writer, and guide who has touched the hearts and lives of many seekers through his love, simplicity, and clarity. Thank you all for joining to be here and taking this time for your inner journey. May today's session sow a gentle seed of understanding that grows month after month. With gratitude to the divine, let us begin. Sir.
Thank you, Richa, and namaste to all of you. Nice to see you all in such large numbers in this session. Uh, the sessions on the Gita seem to be particularly popular, and that's very encouraging. Uh, for good order, let me turn to the context of the Gita. The beginning of the Gita is with the battlefield, Kurukshetra, where the Kaurava and the Pandava armies are arrayed against each other. And Arjun, who is leading the Pandavas, is there as a Kshatriya to protect good from evil, to defend justice in the face of injustice. That was the Swadharma of the Kshatriya. And but all what happens is that when the battle is about to begin, he develops cold feet. And we have all experienced that sometimes that we may prepare for an event with great enthusiasm, but when we are very close to the event, we suddenly develop a heavy heart and feel that why did we get into it at all? So that is what happens to him, and that is not just because battle is something which is not a very ordinary or a pleasant thing to get into, but because he finds that in front of him are those whom he has loved and respected for a very long time, the grandfather and the gurus and cousins and so on, and he feels that what for is all this? Is it to just win a war and thereby get a kingdom? I don't want all this. I don't, nothing in fact. And he feels that good that I realized this still in time. The battle has still not begun. And while there is still time, why not change my decision? And he declares, I will not fight. Now, but at the same time, knowing that he is he has limited intelligence, he seeks the uh, guidance from Sri Krishna. Although, I mean, he has more or less decided that he will not fight, but since Sri Krishna is in front of him as his charioteer, he uh, feels that, well, going by the Shastra, Shastras are the written code of conduct that we all have in the Hindu tradition. We call them the Shastra. So that's a written ethical code for all uh, types of people, all classes of people, and there's a Kshatriya code. There's a code of conduct for the Kshatriya, the groups to which he belonged, and this group, a small group though, is expected to defend good against evil, justice against injustice, to protect the weak against the strong, and to protect the oppressed from the oppressor. No, that is what they are for, and for that it is necessary to fight. They are expected to fight. All this he knew. But then at this moment, there was a conflict. There was a conflict between his duty as a Kshatriya on one hand, and on the other hand, his compassion for human beings in general, and particularly for those whom he loved and respected. And therefore, he forgets that why he was actually there in the battlefield as a Kshatriya. Instead, he starts looking upon it as something which was purely to get some worldly gains like a kingdom and enjoy the worldly pleasures, because that also he was going to get, because it was the Pandavas who were the ones who had been treated unjustly, and all options had been exhausted, and the war had become inevitable. So, in the Shastras, one of the things also is that when there is a conflict like this and the person can't make up his mind, he should ask somebody who is wise. And although Sri Krishna, he didn't know at that time that he was the divine itself, that is something, at least one way in which we are better informed than Arjuna. Because Arjun, was taking him as a friend, as a very wise person, as a close relative, but he didn't really realize that I have the divine in front of him. But all the same, knowing his profound wisdom, he thought that here is a wise man available to me. Why not seek his advice, as the Shastras say? So that is how Sri Krishna gets into the picture. So, with this little background, let me turn to the slides. So today we'll talk about only the first 38 verses of the second chapter. This series of talks is dedicated to my biological mother, uh, in whose lap I heard the Gita for the first time as a toddler. So at the end of chapter 1, as I said, Arjun has a heavy heart. He develops a rather faint heart and sits down. He abandoned his weapons and said, I will not fight. Now, Sanjay is the one who is narrating what is going on in the battlefield to Dhritarashtra. So, Sanjay narrates this situation, and that's what we find in the first verse of the second chapter. Now, what do you think Sri Krishna would say? Now that we are even better informed that Arjuna and know that Sri Krishna was the divine itself, so what would Krishna say? One might feel that Sri Krishna would praise him for having given up desires. That's one of the most difficult thing to do. I want nothing. So he has overcome all desires, and he's full of compassion. Overcoming desires and having compassion is something that we associate with the divine. And so that's what we would expect, that Arjun will get praise and he will be told, okay, you need not fight. I'm very happy that you have given up all desires and you are so compassionate. But let's see what Sri Krishna actually says. Richa?
Yes, sir. कुतस्त्वाकशमलमिदं विषमे समुपस्थितम् अनार्यजुष्टमस्वर्ग्यम् अकीर्तिकरमर्जुन क्लैब्यं मा स्म गमः पार्थ नैतत्त्वय्युपपद्यते क्षुद्रं हृदयदौर्बल्यं त्यक्तोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप.
So Sri Krishna actually administers him a mild but a very firm rebuke. Tells him what has happened to you. Your behavior does not befit an Aryan. Now that raises the question, who is an Aryan? And that is something I can tell a little properly, because Sri Aurobindo has talked about it in some detail in the Renaissance in India and other essays on Indian culture, which is the 20th volume of the complete works of Sri Aurobindo. And in that work, on page 164, he says that an Aryan is a good and noble man. That was the original idea of an Aryan. And what are the characteristics of such a man? in the heart, at the emotional level. He is full of love, compassion, and patience. In his character, he has courage, loyalty, truth, justice, obedience, and reverence where due. Not obedience to unfair authority, not reverence for someone who doesn't deserve it, but where due, he was perfectly obedient and full of reverence. Power to govern at the same time. While being obedient, when required to govern, he had the power to govern, and he had a fine modesty and yet strong independence and noble pride. At the level of the intellect, he was full of wisdom, love of learning, knowledge, interest in poetry, art, and beauty, educated, skilled in works, and in the inner being, he had a strong spiritual inclination. In social relations, he observed dharma in all his roles that he had to play in the world as a father, as a son, as a partner, as a friend, and if he was a king, as a king, if he was a subject, then as a subject, if he was a master, then as a master, and if he was a servant, as a servant, and so on. So, in his social relations, he observed his dharma, whatever was required, whatever was the right thing to do in that particular role. That was an Aryan. So, he's reminded this doesn't befit an Aryan. You're expected to follow your dharma, have all these qualities, and follow your dharma in the role that you are in. So your behavior is not Aryan. And then he reminds him that if you do not follow your dharma, neither you will get heaven after death, nor will you win glory in this world. So you'll suffer both now in this world and after you die, you will not go to heaven if that is the type of behavior you show. O Partha, not worthy of thee. So he calls him by different names throughout the Gita. Here Arjuna is called Partha. And Partha literally means the son of Pritha. And Pritha is another name of Kunti, Arjun's mother. So, these also have some significance why a particular name has been used at a particular point by Sri Krishna for while addressing Arjuna, because if one is reminded of his parentage, of his lineage, you are the son of Kunti, then you would think that how can I do it? I could not do something dishonorable in view of how great my mother is. It will be a dishonor also to my mother that her son did it. So that he's appealing to that, and then he tells him, shake off that faint-heartedness and arise. O Parantapa, another name he uses for Arjuna. Parantapa means a scourge, a whip, one whom the foes are afraid of. They start trembling when they see that person. So that is the type of strength you have, and that is the type of lineage you have. You are the son of Pritha. How can you behave in an unaryan manner, which will deprive you of both heaven after death and glory in this world? Now, if having got this rebuke and seeing that it is a rather fair rebuke because he was quite familiar with all the Swadharma of a Kshatriya, what do you expect Arjuna to say? Will he say, okay, I will fight? Understood. But let's see what he actually says.
Arjun uvacha Katham bhishmamaham sankhe dronam cha madhusudana ishubhi pratiyotsyami pujarha varisudana Guru हत्वा हि महानुभावा न श्रेयो भोक्तुं भैक्षमपि हलोके हत्वार्थकामांस्तु गुरूनिहैव भुञ्जीय भोगान् रुधिरप्रदिग्धान्
So, what does Arjun say when he gets this scolding? You can't behave in this unaryan manner. How can I kill my gurus? What use is all this blood-stained wealth? If I fight this war, they'll die, and what I win will be blood-stained. And then he admits that I am confused. You know? uh, and so, and then he says that I'm so confused that I can't make out right from wrong. So please tell me what is right and wrong. Tell me definitively and clearly what is right and wrong. I am your disciple. I take refuge in you. But at the same time, he declares, I will not fight. So you can see that uh, while he sought Sri Krishna's advice, when instead of getting the advice that he was expecting, that, okay, you need not fight, you are very compassionate and you have given up all desires, he doesn't get that. So, I know that happens quite often when we ask for advice. Actually, we are looking for confirmation. We want support for what we feel like doing. He was not feeling like fighting, he wanted support for that. But instead, when he got a rebuke, realizing that Sri Krishna is a very wise one, and after all, I have asked him for advice. So he tries to repeat his arguments first in the hope that maybe now he'll be convinced and tell me, okay, you need not fight. So first he repeats some of the arguments in other words, in different words. But at the same time, he's again probably looking for confirmation and therefore admits that I'm confused and you tell me what is the right thing to do. And I'm right now your disciple and I take refuge in you. But same time, he ends with that I will not fight. So, you can see that seeking confirmation and yet sort of handing over to him that maybe some last hope he will confirm. And then I'll say that, well, I felt like doing so. Sri Krishna also said the same thing. Now, what do you think Sri Krishna will do? Will he now continue arguing, now give him some more arguments in uh, favor of fighting? Let's see what Sri Krishna actually does. Actually, he starts talking about death, which is surprising. And in fact, these verses from 11 through 30 are amongst the most widely quoted, at least some of them are most widely quoted verses of the Gita, because they give us a great deal of consolation when somebody dies. So they're used very often in obituaries, etc. And now, why does Sri Krishna start talking about death? That was not the question that Arjun had asked. He just asked, "What should I do? What is the right thing for me to do? Should I fight or should not fight?" Now, he had been told that indirectly that he should fight, but then that had not convinced him. Now, going on arguing only escalates the arguments, number one. So that's why Sri Krishna now goes tangentially. Secondly, being a good teacher, he now starts making use of this opportunity for giving Arjuna uh, some sort of what you call these days lateral learning. That, by the way, you'll get the answer, but learn something deeper and higher, which you are not so familiar with. But at the same time, he doesn't give it to him in great detail right now in these verses, thereby arising his curiosity. So now he makes him hungry for knowledge. So all this Sri Krishna is doing from. So it's a very pragmatic response that instead of continuing the arguments, which will only escalate the arguments, instead of going on arguing, he goes a little tangentially and starts talking about death.
श्रीभगवानुवाच अशोच्यानन्वशोचस्त्वं प्रज्ञावादांश्च भाषसे गतासून गतासूंश्च नानुशोचन्ति पण्डिताः न त्वेवाहं जातु नासं न त्वं नेमे जनाधिपाः न चैव न भविष्यामः सर्वे वयमतः परम् देहिनोऽस्मिन् यथा देहे कौमारं यौवनं जरा तथा देहान्तरप्राप्तिर्धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति.
So what Sri Krishna tells him is that you are speaking wise seeming words. They seem very wise, that I don't want to kill my kith and kin, and I've developed a sense of compassion. What use will be getting the kingdom if it is stained with blood, and so on. So these are wise seeming words. So, the intellect is very clever, and Sri Krishna is telling him that you can always cover your intentions with very good arguments. Seems wise, which means it is not actually wise. So he's offering him some higher wisdom, which is genuine wisdom. So that wisdom now follows that all have always been here. All whom you see right now in the world have already been here and will always be there. Which means that in the real sense, nobody really dies, uh, and nobody has come to this world for the first time. Those who are here right now were there once upon a time in their previous lives, and will always be there in some world and will probably come back to this world again. So, this is just the cycle of one lifetime on this earth that we go through childhood, youth, and old age. This is in one life, and then death. Then the soul enters another body. The calm and the wise are not deluded by this. Calm and wise, the word used is dhira. So, when dhira is calm, firm, and wise. Dhira is fixed at a place, which means he's firm. At the same time, he's calm and wise. So, such a person is not deluded by death because he knows these deeper facts that death is not as real as it looks. In fact, it is an illusion, and it's after death the soul still continues to live and enters another body, gets embodied again.
मात्रा स्पर्शास्तु कौन्तेय शीतोष्णसुखदुःखदाः आगमापायिनो नित्यास् तांस्तितिक्षस्व भारत यं हि न व्यथयन्त्येते पुरुषं पुरुषर्षभ समदुःखसुखं धीरं सोमृतत्वाय कल्पते.
So now actually he is jumping a little and telling him what is it that happens to us when we are able to grasp this deeper knowledge. We develop a sense of equanimity. We treat cold and heat, pleasure and pain equally because these are transient. They are going to pass away. And what actually stays is the soul, the, the imperishable, and what is eternal. Now, therefore, a person who acquires this deeper knowledge is able to stay equal, which means he develops such profound equanimity that he is able to treat cold and heat, pleasure and pain in an equal manner. And as we shall see sometime later, he accepts all these with equal delight, in fact. And not only that, one who is able, one who grasps this knowledge acts upon it and develops this type of equality to the opposites like cold and heat, pleasure and pain, victory and defeat, and so on. One who develops this qualifies himself for immortality. So here's there's a temptation throne of immortality.
नासतो विद्यते भावो ना भावो विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्त स्तनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः अविनाशी तु तद्विद्धि येन सर्वमिदं ततं विनाशमव्ययस्यास्य न कश्चित् कर्तुमर्हति. अन्तवन्त इमे देहा नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः अनाशिनो प्रमेयस्य तस्माद्युद्धस्व भारत. य एनं वेत्ति हन्तारं यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तौ न विजानीतो नायं हन्ति न हन्यते.
So he's given some more deeper knowledge, the deeper truths of existence. What really is does not cease to exist. So anything that exists never really ceases to exist. So something like the internet on a smaller scale, not to that extent, that once something has been on the internet, we know that you really never can delete it completely. It stays in cyberspace. Now, that which is non existent cannot come into being. On the other hand, what does not exist cannot arise out of nothing. And what exists, what is real, and what has come into being from time to time is that. That means the one divine. And that is all pervasive. and imperishable. Now, this is the characteristic of the divine. It pervades all existence and is imperishable. And what perishes are only the bodies, or what the manifestations of this all pervasive, imperishable entity are, and therefore fight. Nothing really dies in the true sense. Now, this may require a little further uh, explanation. Uh, divine, how is it all pervasive? It's imperishable, that we can understand. Now, to put it very briefly, uh, before anything really came into existence in the material universe, there must have been something that must have existed, because after all, only nothing can arise out of nothing. And therefore, if the material universe came into being, it must have come out of something. And naturally, what it came out of was not something material, because the material universe didn't exist. So, what existed before that was a non material entity. Call it by any name. One of the names that we use is consciousness with a capital C, the supreme consciousness. And why I'm using that particular name here is because that consciousness with a capital C implies a self aware force, which means it is aware and it has force. What is it aware of? Everything. It is all knowing. And what is the type of force it has? All potent, omnipotent, capable of doing anything. So, the one who knows everything and can do everything, that type of a self aware force is that supreme consciousness. Now, the supreme consciousness, which was a non material entity, still had one major problem. And what was that problem? The problem was how to create this material universe when no material exists, because it was a non material entity. Now, how did it solve this problem? By itself becoming the material which it wanted to create. Since it could do everything, it could do this also. One of the things it could do was to itself become material. Now, if it itself becomes material, now it automatically follows from this that it is present in everything that it created. Why say present in everything? It itself is everything that it created. It's just another form of the same. So, uh, something like this. Suppose a child starts with a square piece of paper, folds it, and makes a boat out of it. Now, if we ask this child, does this boat have the paper? What a ridiculous question. It is the paper itself which has become the boat. So, in the same way, the creator itself became the creation. So, if the creator became the creation is nothing but the creator in another form, just as the boat is just the paper in another form. It has just changed its form. But all the same, there is a difference. Now, the entire paper has become the boat and there's nothing left outside. But the creator was infinite, and therefore, when it created the material universe, it didn't exhaust itself, because the material universe it created was still finite. And when you take something finite out of the infinite, the remainder is also infinite. So it continued to exist in an unmanifest manner, in an invisible form, outside this entire creation. So that is what we call the transcendent divine, which doesn't have a form and exists all outside all its creation. But now coming back to the creation itself, since the creation is nothing but the creator in another form, naturally it is there in all creation, so it's all pervasive. And of course, it is imperishable. So the essence of all creation is also imperishable. And we are also a part of that creation. So the essence of the divine that we have, which pervades us, is also imperishable. And what pervades us as individuals is what is called the soul. So it is that imperishable entity, the soul, which is the divine essence, which pervades us and all creation, which Sri Krishna is here talking about, that which is all pervasive and imperishable. Sarvagataha, Sarvamidam. So, the one which is everywhere, all pervading, and uh, has gone everywhere, wherever it created anything. So it's all pervasive and it's imperishable. And therefore, only the forms can perish. Their essence is imperishable, but the forms have been created in such a way that this is one of their qualities, that they do perish, but then perish only apparently. Even in sort of scientifically, that nothing really perishes. There's a conservation of all matter and energy. So nothing really perishes, but all the same, apparently, there is a certain sort of a truth a certain level of truth. At a certain level of truth, does perish, but at a higher level, nothing really perishes. And the essence certainly is all pervasive and imperishable. So he's trying to, Sri Krishna is trying to give him all this as a background to justify that he should fight. Now, now, if we, in back view of this knowledge, Sri Krishna tells him that since the essence is imperishable, nobody is really slain, nobody is really killed. And if nobody is killed, there's no slayer, there's nobody who kills, because you need both for anybody to be killed, the one who kills or the slayer, and the one who is killed, that is the slain. Now, these terms are used because of not perceiving the truth. Truth with a capital T. With a small t, yes, to a limited extent, it is true, but it is not the highest truth, the deepest truth, the widest truth. In terms of that truth, which is the total truth with a capital T, there's nothing like a slayer and the slain. And if nobody is slain, how can there be a slayer? Because you need both these for anybody to be slain. And this is that imperishable entity, the soul, an artist's sort of view of it. And now start those verses which are about the soul itself.
Yes, sir. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचि नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूय अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे वेदाविनाशिनं नित्यं य एनमजमव्ययम् कथं स पुरुषः पार्थ घं घातयति हन्तिकम् वासांसि जीर्णानि यथा विहाय नवानि गृह्णाति नरोपराणि तथा शरीराणि विहाय जीर्णा न्यन्यानि संयाति नवानि देहि.
So these verses are about the characteristics of the soul. It is neither born nor does it die. And in light of what that's our divine essence, and the divine is imperishable, this applies to it. It is not even born because we assume that the divine itself always existed and will always be there. It did not have to be born. It's the uncreate. Now, sometimes some people argue that so therefore this wisdom is unscientific because you acknowledge that we know nothing about how it was born, so we just assume that it has always been there. But then what happens in science? The same thing. You do some research to find something, and then you find that that raises some more questions. So you to answer those questions, you do some more research. Now you know the cause behind the cause that you found, sort of, one might say. So that raises further questions. You do some more research. Ultimately, where do you reach? If somebody goes on questioning you, okay, what was it behind this? What was the cause for this? What was the reason for this? So you keep going back in research further and further. Ultimately, you say, I don't know. So if that is true of such finite and limited knowledge, here we are talking about infinite knowledge, which goes back to the very beginning of time, and we are not ready to accept even this assumption. And if this assumption we do not make, then how do we rationally explain the creation of the universe? We saw that although you cannot prove the uh, creation from the creator by the creator itself becoming the creation, although you cannot prove it in the scientific manner, but same time you can rationalize it. It is not based on rational analysis, it is based on the experience of the rishis. But at the same time, it can be rationalized as we saw. And therefore, just as the divine itself is not neither born nor does it ever die, in a way we can say that soul also is neither born nor does it die. It passes away, all right, but then it comes into being again, it gets embodied again. It is ancient because one doesn't know when this individual sort of soul came into being, uh, and it is constant. That is one of the qualities of the divine, and it is imperishable, which is also a quality of the divine. So all the qualities of the divine have been passed on, are retained by the divine essence of the person, which is the soul, and it is not slain. The body is slain, but not it is not slain. So one who knows all this How can such a man slay or cause to be slain? When we know that really the most important reality, the fundamental reality of a person does not die, then how can anybody be slain? And if it cannot be slain, there can be no slayer. And here comes one of the most widely quoted verses that actually the embodied soul just casts away the old body and takes up a new body, just as a person changes his worn out clothes. So the body is also worn out. So the person gives up the body, or you can say the soul escapes from the body, whichever way you may like to put it. And the body is left behind, so to say, lifeless, because what was energizing it, was animating it, that divine essence is gone. The matter is still left behind to decay, which is the property of matter. But the what was animating it is has gone, has left, because the you may call it the cage, the body and the mind, or you may call it the palace. Whether you make a palace out of the cage is to some extent up to us. So whatever you may like to call it, but it escapes, because sooner or later time comes, as in the case of clothes, when it is too weak and fragile to be able to further keep fulfilling the genuine purpose of life. So death is not just a physical necessity that sooner or later we have to get worn out. It is also a spiritual necessity, because there can come a stage when the person is no longer able to fulfill the genuine purpose of life. And that also will, I'm sure, come at many points in the Gita. So once again, a little more about the soul.
नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्त्यापो न शोषयति मारुतः अच्छेद्योऽयम् अदायोऽयम् अक्लेद्यो शोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतः स्थाणुर् अचलोऽयं सनातनः अव्यक्तोऽयम् मचिन्त्योऽयम् अविकार्योऽयमुच्यते तस्मादेवं विदित्वैनं नानुशोचितुमर्हसि अथ चैनं नित्यजातं नित्यं वा मन्यसे मृतं तथापि त्वं महाबाहो नैवं शोचितुमर्हसि.
So the characteristics of the soul continue in these verses. And he is told that weapons cannot split it, it's uncleavable. Fire cannot burn it, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it. It is stable, it is constant, it is immobile, it is all pervading, and it is everlasting. It continues forever and forever. It is imperceivable. With our ordinary senses, we can't perceive it. It is inconceivable. We can't even imagine what it is like. It is immutable. It cannot be altered. Therefore, do not grieve. Do not grieve if the body is cast off, if the body dies, do not grieve. But then he concedes that even if you think of this soul as being subject to birth and death, still, O mighty, armed, here he's addressing by another name, Mahabaho, you should not grieve. And why you should not grieve? Even if you do not believe in all this knowledge that I have given you, that it is immortal, even if you believe that it's subject to birth and death, still you should not grieve. Why? That comes in the next one.
जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युर्ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्मादपरिहार्येऽर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि.
So Sri Krishna realizes the limitation of the student. Right now, he may be still not able to grasp all this knowledge, very deep knowledge, which has been given very briefly in a great hurry, and in a state in which Arjuna is already confused and therefore cannot use his mind properly, perhaps. His intellect is not at its peak in that state. Sri Krishna, like a good teacher, concedes that maybe now you do not understand. You may still feel that the individual is truly subject to birth and death. But then still you should not grieve. Why? Because for anyone who is born, death is a certainty. And same time, anyone who has died, birth is a certainty. Certain is death for the born, jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu, and certain is the birth for the dead, dhruvam janma mritasya cha. So dhruva means, uh, fixed. There is something fixed, unchangeable. You can't avoid it. So therefore, this is inevitable, apariharya. So what is apariharya means inevitable, जिसको टाल नहीं सकते. For that which is inevitable, you should not sorrow, because if you can't stop it, you can't avoid it, then why have sorrow? Why grieve over it?
अव्यक्तादीनि भूतानि व्यक्तमध्यानि भारत अव्यक्तनिधनान्येव तत्र का परिदेवना.
So once again, he repeats something that has been said earlier, like a good teacher, you again summarize what you have said. So he tells him that all living things go through a cycle. Earlier, he told him that they go through uh, childhood, youth, old age, and then die. Here, telling him they all start in an unmanifest fashion, that is, as the soul. Uh, then there's a middle which is manifest, that is embodied soul, and the end is again unmanifest. The soul leaves, and that is the true entity, and that is unmanifest. The body which is left behind is not the true reality of the person. So then why grieve? So here is a pictorial representation, starting with the unmanifest, then getting embodied as a newborn, going through childhood, youth, old age, and dying. The body is still left behind, but the soul has escaped, and that is unmanifest. Here's another picture showing this beautiful picture showing the same thing, that here is a child, uh, the embodied soul growing up, and then going through this entire cycle, and dying, and then staying in some other world in an unmanifest form, and then when the time comes to get embodied again, once again returning in another fresh body. So the cycle goes on, and all what encompasses all this is basically the infinite. So everything is a sort of just a sort of phenomenon. It's all phenomenal reality. That's why we call it, or Vyavaharik Satya. But the essence is the infinite.
आश्चर्यवत् पश्यति कश्चिदेन माश्चर्यवद्वदति तथैव चान्य आश्चर्यवच्चैनमन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वाप्येनं वेद न चैव कश्चित्. देहि नित्यमवध्योऽयं देहे सर्वस्य भारत तस्मात् सर्वाणि भूतानि न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि.
So here Sri Krishna tells him that uh, it is true that what I have told you so far is full of mystery. It sounds very mysterious at the mental level, because this is a knowledge which has been actually received by the rishis at a level higher than the mental. So it is a mysterious, uh, no doubt. But the fact is that the dweller in the body is eternal and indestructible, and therefore you should not grieve. You just sort till you are able to grasp the mystery fully, just accept it as working knowledge, as we often do in science. So this again, your picture shows the same thing beautifully, that here is that those chains in which the soul was embodied. So the body and the mind are a sort of that chain, call it a chain or a prison or a palace, call it an iron chain or a golden chain, whatever you like to call. And in fact, that is the purpose of life, to sort of undergo that type of transformation, which makes it more of a palace and or a golden chain. But then, all the same, it is subject to the laws of uh, death and decay, and therefore, the time will come when the soul escapes. तो कहते हैं ना, पंछी उड़ जाएगा जब समय आएगा तो. So that's when that will happen. But then here is an important question which sort of one can get hypnotized by all this knowledge, and one could sort of forget to ask this question, that well understood, that There's nothing like really death. Death is only a sort of a stage in a long journey, a transition, a type of a station in a long journey. It is not truly the end. It is only a passage from one station to the other. So nobody should grieve over anybody's death, a generalizable fact. But then that does not mean that anybody can kill anybody just because death is not real. Not only that, uh, just because nobody should grieve over anybody's death, and therefore that doesn't mean that anybody can kill anybody. One might narrow it down to say, can a Kshatriya kill anybody? Even he can't. Can a Kshatriya kill to defend good and justice? Yes, he can, but there may be some qualifications. One of the qualifications is that he should kill only as a last resort. So a Kshatriya should also kill to defend good and justice, to protect the weak and the oppressed, only as the last resort. But even if it is the last resort, what should be the attitude while killing? Other considerations. It should not be out of hatred for the evildoer. It should be hatred for the evil, not for the evildoer. Should the focus be on reward? What will I get by doing this? No, the focus should not be on reward. So Arjun need not have the focus on the kingdom that he will get. Should the focus be at least on success that I should win the war? Even that focus is not necessary. One has to do one's bit in the best way one can and leave the outcome to the divine. Now, all these things will come to some extent in the second chapter itself, but that part we will not go into today. That will come next time. So, these are all important considerations. And why I'm going over all this is because the Gita is often misunderstood. It's misunderstood in the sense that how can the divine itself, whom we equate with all love and compassion, how can he tell Arjun to fight and kill so many people? Now, there are so many qualifications to it, and that is what comes out. Not everybody can kill, only one whose duty it is to kill should. And not only whose duty it is, but under certain conditions, only as a last resort with a certain attitude, with a certain bent of mind. And that is the only situation in which this violence has been supported. But then here it was necessary. And that's one thing we have to understand that the Gita is about what actually applies to this world. It is not just a sort of ideal sort of a dream, which may become very impractical under certain situations. So, under certain situations, violence may be necessary. And then, what are those conditions? And with what attitude that violence becomes permissible, that all comes out through the Gita. But then these are all questions. Did Arjuna ask all these questions? Because we have constructed all these questions on the basis of what Sri Krishna has spoken in these verses, particularly verses 11 through 30. So that has raised all these questions. Did Arjuna ask all these questions? No, he didn't. He was too bewildered to ask such questions. And Sri Krishna probably didn't even give him much time to ask any such questions. She continued along a slightly different line. Now Sri Krishna changed gears, and that's what we'll see.
स्वधर्ममपि चावेक्ष्य न विकम्पितुमर्हसि धर्म्याद्धियुद्धात् श्रेयोऽन्य क्षत्रियस्य न विद्यते यदृच्छया चोपपन्नं स्वर्गद्वारमपावृतं सुखिनः क्षत्रियाः पार्थ लभन्ते युद्धमीदृशम् अथ चेत्त्वमिमं धर्म्यं सङ्ग्रामं न करिष्यसि ततः स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापमवाप्स्यसि.
So, in these three verses, 31 through 33, Sri Krishna comes down to the level which the disciple is familiar with. He tells him that your dharma or swadharma, as a Kshatriya, in terms of that, what is right and wrong, that is what you should be looking at. Now, that is the beauty of the Hindu tradition, in which there is no fixed ethical code for everybody. The ethical code varies with the type of person he is. For example, Arjuna is a Kshatriya. It also varies with the stage in life. The ethical code during brahmacharya or sort of the young age when one is a student is different from later on when one is a householder, and that in turn is different from the dharma of that person in old age. There's a beautiful story on this Swadharma, in this concept, how deeply it is rooted in our culture. And it's a real life incident. To wipe out smallpox from the country, everybody was being vaccinated against smallpox, even if the person was not willing. And in a village, there was a person who said that I and my family will not get vaccinated. So finally, to force him to get vaccinated, the vaccinators reached there with a few policemen. So these policemen tied the family members down one by one, and the vaccinator vaccinated all of them. Once the vaccination was over, then this person told them, wait, when these people started leaving after vaccination, after vaccinating all of them, this person said, please wait. Please have a cup of tea before you leave. They were amazed. How can this person, whose family we have vaccinated against his will, so forcibly with the help of a police force, how can he offer us tea? And he provided the explanation himself. He told them, you were only doing your duty. Your dharma was to vaccinate me. You fulfilled your dharma. Now I have to fulfill my dharma. You are guests in my house. That's why I'm offering you tea. So your dharma is different from my dharma, swadharma. Your dharma was to vaccinate. My dharma is to treat you as guests. Atithi devo bhava. A guest is like God. So you can't leave this house without having a cup of tea. Now that is swadharma. It's so deeply rooted in our culture. It's recent history. So Sri Krishna is telling him that your dharma calls for fighting in this particular situation. And not only that, he further sort of holds some more temptations for him. You are lucky to have this opportunity because every Kshatriya also may not get in his entire life any opportunity to actually fight a battle. You are lucky that you are having this opportunity because it is by following our Swadharma that we fulfill the true purpose of our life. You have an opportunity to fulfill the purpose of your life through which you will grow spiritually, and you have this opportunity. Don't waste the opportunity. You are lucky that you are having an opportunity which even every Kshatriya does not get. So look at the sort of turn he's giving it. And now look at it. If you fulfill your Swadharma, you go to heaven. And if you do not, then you incur sin. He's not telling him you to go to hell, but at least you incur sin. That's putting it mildly. So he's telling him choice is between going to heaven if you fulfill your Swadharma, if you follow your what is right and wrong for you. If you follow that, you go to heaven after death. And if not, you at least incur sin.
अकीर्तिं चापि भूतानि कथयिष्यन्ति ते व्ययाम् सम्भावितस्य चाकीर्ति मरणादतिरिच्यते भयाद्रणादु परतं मत्स्यन्ते त्वां महारथाः येषां च त्वं बहुमतो भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम् अवाच्य वादांश्च बहून् वदिष्यन्ति तवाहिताः निन्दन्तस्तव सामर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतरं नु किम्.
Now he's further speaking in ordinary terms, the way Arjun will easily understand that if you do not fight, then what will be the consequences? You will incur dishonor. People will talk uh, things against you, and they'll feel that you fled the war because of fear. Now, to incur this type of dishonor, to be talked about this way, to suffer uh, the sort of your reputation going down, all that is for an honorable person, even worse than death. What can be worse than these things happening to a person?
हतो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि.
So Sri Krishna is sort of now summing up in these two verses, and by now he has given him all types of, in a way, reasons, some direct and some indirect, why he should not hesitate to fight. whether he looks upon it in terms of the deeper knowledge that the soul is immortal, then therefore nobody really dies, or whether he looks upon it as his swadharma, which Arjuna is more familiar with, that if you follow your swadharma, then the consequences are that you uh, go to heaven, and if you do not follow, then you incur sin, and then you also incur loss of your reputation, and then he's further telling him that if you die fighting, you go to heaven, and if you win, that you enjoy here on earth, a kingdom and wealth and all that, and then go to heaven after death. And if you do not fight, you incur sin, and therefore get up and fight. In other words, look at it in any way you like, whether in terms of the deepest knowledge that the soul is immortal, or in terms of the knowledge of the Shastras, that what is your swadharma, and whether you look at it in terms of consequences, uh, you find that there's a win-win situation, whether you win the war or lose the war, whether you die or whether you survive, no matter what happens, if you fight, then you get what is highly desirable, whether it is going to heaven or whether it is enjoying here on earth. And of course, even if he enjoys here on earth a kingdom, even then one day he is sure to die, then he'll again go to heaven after death. On the other hand, if you do not fight, then the consequences are just the opposite. So look at it in any way you like, therefore get up and fight. So Sri Krishna has given him the answer to the question whether I should fight or not. But then he has gone through all this route, trying to show him in different ways and given him knowledge which he has not fully understood. Arjun has not understood yet fully. But then it serves as a good background, also arouses the curiosity of the student, which any good teacher tries to do. And that is what Sri Krishna has done till now. And in fact, he'll go further into deeper knowledge in the subsequent verses of chapter 2, which brings out sort of the practical implications of the deeper knowledge which has just begun. So, in one way, I can say that it arouses the curiosity of the student. In other words, it now silences the student because now that he has been told so much, probably he'll not start arguing again that I do not want to fight. So, at least he'll now keep listening. He'll become more attentive and patient listener and try to absorb this wisdom. So, look at it either way. But Sri Krishna uh, is a great teacher, and uh, as I said, we have the at least one advantage which Arjuna didn't have. We know that it is all very natural for this teacher to give this type of knowledge because it is the divine itself. The teacher is the divine itself. The student is a human disciple, a highly accomplished disciple, but at the same time ignorant of the true nature of the divine. He has to wait till chapter 10 to see who is it that who is standing in front of me. Now, this leads us to another little corollary. You might have heard of that quote from Benjamin Franklin that there are two things which are certain in life: death and taxes. Bernie Siegel, a cancer surgeon, has extended this a bit with his own sense of wit and humor. Bernie Siegel, brought the mind-body approach, particularly the spiritual approach, in the management of cancer. Uh, but that apart, he has written many popular paperbacks. One of them is 365 Prescriptions for the Soul. And in that, is says there are only three things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and criticism. So this is just a side to bring a little lighter touch. Uh, but then the serious question is death an illusion? Now that raises the question, what is an illusion? An illusion is something which appears different from what it really is. So death is an illusion because it looks like the end, but it is not really the end. So it looks different from what it really is. The common analogy, or common example given for an illusion is a snake looking like a rope or a rope looking like a snake. So what is actually a rope may look like a snake. So looking different from what it really is an illusion. Now, in the same way, death is an illusion because it is looks like the end, but it is not truly the end. But then is life also an illusion? Because this is an idea which is much more common. The common understanding in society is that death is a reality. We have seen that it is not a reality at the deepest level, it is an illusion. But then it's quite common feeling that life is an illusion. All this is a play, a maya, an illusion. And that also is true to some extent because what we see and take very seriously actually is not worthy of that type of serious attention in a way, because uh, that creates many complications because we take what we see as the final reality. But all the same, at a deeper level, if we go, we say that it's all an illusion, so it is not worthy of this attention. Now, that is a dangerous way of looking at it, although to some extent it is an illusion, because even life or the way the world runs is an illusion, because there's a deeper reality behind it, an unseen hand which is running the world, which is running our life. So all that is true. But all the same, we do not ordinarily have that type of consciousness, and we start feeling that all this is real. And when we go a little deeper, we say, since it is an illusion, it's only one step further from there. We say it is a falsehood, and therefore it does not require serious attention. Now, that can lead to a neglect of the true purpose of life. And that's why Sri Aurobindo has emphasized the real part of life, because life also has a real part. While it is there, it is real. It is real at a phenomenal level, and that is important. And it has been given to us with a purpose. And therefore, if we have to fulfill that purpose, we have to engage with life without getting entangled. We'll not get entangled if we are aware of the illusion part, but same time, we should also be aware of the real part to engage. And what is the real part? The real part is that all creation is a manifestation of the divine. So, if the divine is real, its manifestation cannot be unreal. If the paper is real, the boat cannot be unreal. So, it is real, and the way the life runs, that also is being run by through that unseen hand. At least the larger design, the larger picture has been drafted by the divine, and therefore that cannot be unreal. So we should engage with the world, not give it up. And therefore, uh, taking the world as real is also important, not rejecting it as falsehood. However, it is not as perfect. We are not perfect. Life is not as perfect as we would expect a manifestation of the perfect divine to be. But then human being has been given the aspiration and the capacity to work towards perfection, to make uh, move towards the perfection which is fit enough to manifest the perfect divine. So the true purpose of human life, in one way one can say, is not to reject life, but to transform life so that it is able to manifest better the one that it manifests. We should engage with life in such a way that it is transformed to befit the one that it manifests. So that's why Sri Aurobindo's emphasis throughout has been just the opposite of the real perception. Yes, death is an illusion. It's only a passage from life to one life to the next. And life is real up to a point, and therefore engage with life, transform life so that it is more fit to manifest the one that it does. So then, if death is an illusion and life is real only to a limited extent, what is it that is truly real? It is only the divine that is real. And that's why, this real with a capital R. That is the absolute reality. The absolute reality is something which has always been there, will always be there, knows everything, can do everything, and it is constant, completely free of all contradictions. That is the divine. That is the absolute reality. And now you can relate easily to what the mother has said. Do not be afraid of death. Do not wish for death. Do not be afraid of death because it is an illusion. It's only a passage from one life to the next. So don't be afraid of it. At the same time, do not wish for death because while we are here, we have a purpose to fulfill. So engage with life and fulfill that purpose rather than wishing for death. So, with that, thank you all. And I hope I was audible throughout. Although I started with hotspot, I don't know whether it has switched over to the ashram connection on its own. I didn't want to check or disturb anything.
Thank you, sir. Yes, you were very, very audible, very clear, and very enlightening to all of us. And participants, if you'd like to share any reflections or any questions to sir, you could please ask.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, Leena ji.
Uh, very good evening, everyone. My question is, uh, I think what I've learned till now that we say that death is certain, right? Anyone who is born will die one day. This is one thing, whether this year or after 15 years. So today I've got another aspect of it when you say that death is an illusion. So I was just trying to understand both these lines, how I should take it, uh, how both of these exist together.
Well, the two are not contradictory because death is an illusion because the firstly the essence of the person is immortal, that is the soul, and also even for that individual soul it is not the end, it is only a passage from one life to the next, and that intervening period is also necessary, that we'll not get into, for digesting properly the experiences of this life, making full use of them, so that in the next life we arrive at the level of consciousness where we left this world. So the journey can continue, journey of the evolution of the soul can continue. So that way, it is a necessary step. It is necessary in many ways. It is the death is a necessity, as I said, for a physical necessity because the body is subject to decay. The bodily frame becomes body and mind. This complex becomes too weak to support this. Support the fulfilling the purpose of life anymore. So it's a physical necessity. It's a spiritual necessity also, because if we are assured of immortality, probably we'll not engage with the purpose of life. We'll get lost in all the amusement which life offers. And at the same time, it is also necessary because uh, once the body is gone, the journey is seldom complete in one lifetime. So if in one lifetime the entire journey of manifesting the divine fully cannot be completed, then as Sri Aurobindo has said in the Life Divine, death becomes a rational necessity. Sorry, not death becomes rebirth becomes a rational necessity, which means after death we have to come back again. And that's what Sri Krishna says, that not only death is certain for the one who is born, but also being born again is also as much equally a certainty for the one who is born. So illusion to a limited extent that appears different from what it is. It appears like the end, but it is not the end. But at the same time, what appears like the end is a certainty, as all research has shown, as some one of these authors wrote in a humorous way, that a lot of research has been done in this topic. Anyone who is born dies 100% of the time. That is one thing which is certain.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So Dr. Sandhya ji has written a question in the chat box. I'm reading that for you. She asks, when I feel confused about making a decision, is there a specific mantra that can help? The more perspectives I learn about life and situations, the more confusing things seem to become. And then another one is by her, how can a person determine their varn, Kshatriya, Brahmin, etc.? Are these varnas actually hierarchical as they are often portrayed traditionally?
Good questions.
Mm.
The first is about how can we make choices in life. Uh, the best way we can make choices will come towards the end of the Gita. But therefore, I'll not get into that. That comes in the 18th chapter and for a reason. And it comes towards the end because one gets qualified to use that, and also one is and hope to be capable of using that method only after one has digested what goes on in the 17 chapters before that. So I'll not get into that. But all the same, ordinarily we use most of the time our emotional part of the being and the logic for arriving at a choice. But at the same time, once in a while, we do feel that there is something deep within which told us to do something which was probably the best thing to do. And we did it at the spur of the moment. And then we, even if we look at it in retrospect, we feel that, well, probably that was the best thing to do. For example, somebody jumps into cold water to save somebody who is drowning. Now he doesn't think too much, so he has no time to uh, sort of go into various arguments whether I should do it or should not do it, which ethical code tells me to do it, or whether it will be a pleasant experience, unpleasant experience, how well I can swim, uh, whether it will be cold or hot when I jump into the water. He doesn't think of all this, he just jumps. Now, and in retrospect, he's happy he did it because if he had wasted time thinking, then the right thing to do, he might have delayed too much. It might have been too late. So he's happy about it. But all the same, life is not always as simple as jumping into the water to save somebody. So very often we end up making choices which are based on other considerations, getting carried away by emotions, or getting carried away by arguments of the intellect, which can be tricky. As we saw, Arjuna also being told that you are speaking in seemingly wise words, what apparently seems wise. So the intellect is very clever; it can do that. So we do that, and then we can therefore have, because uh, we can get lost between our emotions and the intellect and are unable to, depending upon that deep whisper which may come when we have to jump into the water to save somebody, that we are unable to detect. So that is why the Shastras have made a provision that in that situation you can consult your guru, or if the physical guru is not in the physical, you can consult a wise person. So all that provision is also there in the Shastras. So that is what perhaps we should be doing. So that would be the answer to the first question, that what we can do for choosing things in life. The second is the Varna. Now, the concept of Varna is something which originally was based on temperament. And the fact is that temperament wise, we are different. That's an indisputable fact. And uh, the Brahman was one who was intellectually developed, who had sort of nobility and love for knowledge built into his temperament. And he was uh, was considered a Brahmin, the one who could take quick decisions and had the physical strength as well as the moral courage to fight if necessary for a good cause. He was a Kshatriya. And the one who was guided primarily by worldly loss and gain became the Vaishya, was considered a Vaishya. And the one who was not intelligent enough to do any of the first three, but same time could do very useful work, manual work requiring skills, but not too much of mental abilities, intellectual abilities. Very important work, all the same. And he was considered a Shudra. So it was based on temperament. Now, this has been looked down upon for the right reasons, that gradually it became based on heredity, as you said. And that is where the unfair. And second unfair part was that although everybody is contributing to the society and doing important work, there got established a hierarchy. So neither that hierarchy is justifiable, nor is the hereditary basis which is justifiable. So that is what brought a bad name to this classification of into castes, as it is these days called, or the Varnas. But the origin was right. So, and it is something which is considered associated with only the Hindu tradition. But the fact is that some sort of categorization of people and trying to give the appropriate type of work to the person based on his abilities and temperament is a worldwide phenomenon. There's no society which does not indulge in that. No matter what type of system you set up, but this type of a classification exists. Even Aldous Huxley, who wrote a beautiful book, The Brave New World, where he imagined a world which we'll have when it will become possible to clone people. You need not go through the normal process of reproduction. You will be able to get people with the desired properties by cloning the right type of uh, fertilized eggs. So we'll reach that level in science. So he was a science fiction writing. He wrote that book, Brave New World. Then did he create all people who are very intelligent and uh, prone to scholarship and become Brahmins? No. In that book, he says that he created alphas, betas, gammas, epsilons, deltas, and epsilons, 5 categories to do different types of work in the society. Even he felt that that would be necessary, even in that society which we artificially try to create through scientific means. We will need different types of people. So that type of categorization and the need for everybody to support the society is something which is a inevitable fact At least it's impossible to imagine a society in which you will have all people doing only one type of work. And the only thing is, as far as possible, we should not have a hierarchy. Again, hierarchy for different for people doing different types of people is also an international phenomenon. It varies in degree, not in kind. It's not that only India has treated the Shudras unfairly. The people doing manual work have been treated unfairly all over the world, and in the hierarchy, they are placed at a lower level. Even in societies where today a plumber or a carpenter may earn more than a university professor, when it comes to the social standing, the university professor does have a higher level than the janitor or the plumber or the carpenter. He may be earning more. So, this is an international phenomenon. It's not confined to the Hindu tradition. So, this is something which we have to understand, because under the influence of the type of indoctrination which we were subjected to by the system of education that the British gave us, intellectually oriented Indians tend to look at the caste system with a great deal of revulsion. Not only that, they are embarrassed to admit that this is a part of our tradition. They are ashamed of it. Yes, the darker aspects of it we should be ashamed of, but then being ashamed of or embarrassed is not enough. Let's try to correct it in our society. That is the solution. Not that we throw the baby with the bathwater out and say that we are embarrassed, we are ashamed, and as if it exists only here and doesn't exist in the rest of the world. It exists everywhere. The distortions we should try to correct so that we are doing better than the rest of the world. That is the solution.
Thank you, sir. Participants, I would like to share that the recording for this talk today, as well as all the other offerings and talks that we have on our Yes platform, will be available on our Yes YouTube channel. The channel's name is Yes Spirituality. You can please visit and subscribe and take a look. And this recording also will be available very, very soon on our YouTube channel. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. It was indeed a very enlightening session. Only halfway through the second adhyay of the Bhagavad Gita. We look forward to having you all here next month for the second half of this second adhyay of the Bhagavad Gita. Until then, wishing everyone a very happy new year and a wonderful time with your loved ones. Thank you for being here once again today. And thank you, sir, for enlightening us with beautiful pieces of wisdom from your end. Let us wrap our session today with a moment of silence.